This is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas, the 5th book in the hit A Court of Thorns and Roses series. A quick recap. The Court of Thorns and Roses series. It's over there. I'm not getting it. But here's the recap. In 2014-2013, the prolific fantasy author Sarah J Maas brought out the first novel in this series called A Court of Thorns and Roses, which followed archery poor girl Faerie. She, in the icy winter of being poor and hunting for food like very Katniss Everdeen style, she kills a wolf, but that wolf is actually a fairy, and then another beast fairy named Tamlin come and busts their little hut in and tells them, hey, you gotta pay for your sins, come with me to the magic fairy world or I'm gonna straight up murder you. And then Fairy is like, okay, and then she and Tamlin fall in love, and then like Tamlin gets abducted by this evil fairy queen who's like in love with him named Amarantha. So, long story short, Faerie defeats Amarantha and she frees Tamlin. And on the way, she meets this dude named Rhysand. He's like a complicated dark hero. Okay, so that's book 1. Her and Tamlin are happy. Then book 2 comes around. Tamlin, PTSD. He's abusive now. We're over him. She falls in love with Rhysand. She joins his gang, his friends, the inner circle, whose members are Rhysand, his 2 BFFs, Asriel and Cassian, his cousin Moore, gay rights, and a tiny demon girl named Amren. Okay, so they fall in love, but like Tamlin is evil, so he tries to get her back with the help of some evil king of some island named Hybern who wants to attack this magic fairy kingdom that they're in and wants to take their land. So the king of Hybern abducts Faerie's 2 sisters, Nesta and Elaine, and he throws them into a magical cauldron from which the entire world happened, and they emerge and are fairies now. But Nesta is like, haha, I'm gonna go get you, cauldron, and she stole some cauldron power, and the cauldron is, I guess, sentient, and he's like, no. And so the next person that goes in it is a human queen who works with the king of Hybern named Brialyn. And when Brialyn goes in, she becomes a fairy and she gets similar powers to Nesta, but she got super old and super ugly. Anyway, 3rd book. There's a battle. Okay? It's a big battle book, and the only important thing you need to know is that Cassian kind of has the hots for Nesta, but Nesta doesn't have time for love. She is busy. So the big battle happens and they kind of get saved by Faerie, Elaine's and Nesta's father, who comes out of nowhere with an army and another human queen that was turned into a bird. They defeat the king of Hybern and Nesta stabs him. And her father dies, and everyone is happy at the end. The book is over. Book 4, Fairy Christmas. Nesta is very unhappy, and it's Christmas. Okay, we're here. We're gonna start the book. So, Nesta Acheron is in her depression era. Everyone else might be happy after the battle against Hybern, but she is not. And she has some serious PTSD and guilt because her father died protecting her, and Nesta's whole thing is that she has always been a total and utter cunt to her father. She is self-destructing, having sex with randos, drinking all the time, gambling, going to seedy pubs, taking fairy heroin, you know? But her sister is an empath. And so she is like, this can't happen anymore. Faerie sends Cassian to Nesta's flat. Cassian says, hey Nesta, you have to come with us. And Nesta is like, what the fuck? No, I don't. And then he's like, baby, you got a great rack, but you really gotta come with me. And then Nesta is like, fuck you, but she goes anyway. At her sister's mansion, the gang kind of gang up on her, and they're like, you are a mess, honey, okay? We can't deal with this anymore. So you have 2 choices. You can either go back to the human land, which is really a trick choice because the humans hate fairies and you have no one there and no money and nobody likes you. Or you can go live in this house and train with Cassian and work in a library run by nuns. So she gets flown to the House of Winds, which is like a house on a hill, and they're she really can't get out of it. You have to have wings to get to it. There are stairs, but the stairs are so long that she really can't get down there, especially not in her weak, skinny, frail frame she is right now. So Nesta refuses to train, and they train in Illyria, which is this place that's really cold, and there are like a bunch of sexist old warrior bat people there. She does work in the library because, you know, she feels bad letting other women down, but Cassian can go fuck himself. Now it's time to introduce sort of the background plot, which is that even after the war with Hybern, there's like still like a lot of tension in this land. There are like 6 human queens out there plotting, including the old ugly hag fairy witch Brialyn. Nesta makes 2 new friends. One of them is a girl named Gwyn who works at the library, and the other girl is called Emery, and she works in the Illyrian village, and her cousin Bellius comes in and says, hey, women can't run a shop, and nobody buys stuff from her anyways because she's a woman. Anyway, not very woke of them, but they bond and they become friends. And this is the only part of the book that I care about, Nesta making friends. Nesta keeps refusing to train, and finally it clicks in Cassian's big brain as to what the reason for that is. And that is that Faerie doesn't want to train and embarrass herself in front of, well, all the old sexist Illyrians. And so he decides to train her somewhere else, and he makes a deal with her saying that if you train for an hour, then I owe you a favor. And Nesta agrees, and it turns out, hey, she likes training after all because she doesn't like feeling weak, and so she trains now. Elaine comes over, they fight. In her anger, she tells Elaine that it was her fault that their father died, and then Cassian comes in like, what the fuck is up? And then Nesta kisses him. But it's of course just to wipe that stupid smirk off your face. Not because she likes him. Who do you take me for? Cassian and Nesta are summoned to the gang because, as it turns out, that old evil hag Brialyn is readying armies to attack something. She wants to find the new cauldron to get her youth back, and to do it she needs 3 magical cauldron items: a mask, a crown, and a harp. They're not in a trove, but they're still called a trove. The mask raises the dead, the crown makes people do whatever you tell them, and the harp opens any door, physical or, I don't know, like time and space doors. And to find these cauldron items, they need to do like a magic finding spell, and the only girls that can do the spell are Nesta, Faerie, and Elaine, because they're the cauldron girls. Elaine says, I'll do it. Nesta says, fuck no, you're not gonna do it. And Faerie can't do it because, surprise, Faerie is pregnant. So Nesta agrees to do the finding spell after all. Chapter 22. Nesta and Cassian have sex for the first time, and I must say, Sarah J Maas really improved here. Finally, we have stopped using words like length. We still say core, which I'm deeply offended by. I want more anatomy. Fuck. By the way, I read this scene while I was in my communal kitchen eating a pizza with 3 other people around me. What an experience. They have a friends with benefits thing going on. Just sex, no feelings. And Nesta's like, good, because I hate you. And Cassian is like, ooh. Book goes on. Gwyn signs up for training. Nesta bonds more with Emery. Friendship things, I love it. Chapter 26, they have more sex. And Emery joins training. Gals, the trio, Nesta, Emery, and Gwyn, they like practice and bond over all the gut-wrenching, saucy, vile smut they read. And now they're all friends. More priestesses join training, and all of a sudden, it's like kind of a small army there. New problems arise. Cassian gets summoned to Rhysand's office, and he tells him a secret. Faerie's baby has wings. Illyrian babies have wings, but normal fairies don't have wings. And so the birthing canal of normal fairies is not made to accommodate the wings. So essentially, it's a Renesmee situation where when the baby comes out, Rigatoni will shred Faerie's birth canal. And she will die. Cool. Rhysand, in its utter brilliance, thought, oh, this really won't happen because I'm only half bat anyway, so why would my baby have wings? He knows, but Feyre doesn't know yet. And he doesn't want to tell Feyre and wants to find a solution for himself. And I really don't get this part of the book. I feel like, you know, if I would die from birthing a demon bat baby, I would have liked to know. But they don't tell her. And this is a good thing. Rhysand, he's so in tune with the female body. You know, out of protest. He makes 70 cents to every dollar that Feyre makes. Cassian tells Nesta about all of this. I forgot why. Nesta does the finding spell. And she does end up finding one item. And so her, Asriel, and Cassian go to find the item. And then it's some bog full of evil creatures. So they fly there and all of a sudden Asriel gets shot by arrows. And Cassian is like, I have to go find my buddy. You stay in this tree. And then Nesta doesn't stay in the tree. And she wanders off to find Cassian. Because what if he's in danger? I can help him. Me, who has been training for like 4 minutes. And who has powers but doesn't know how to use them and are so super vague. She comes to a lake where she gets attacked by this creature called the Kelpie. And the Kelpie drags her underwater, wants to murder her. When Nesta is just about to die, she all of a sudden feels one of the magical items in the lake and she calls it to her, and it's the mask. And she puts it on, and with it she raises all the dead people that the Kelpie has murdered before, and they defeat the Kelpie, and she rises up from the lake, and there stands Cassian and Asriel, who have been looking for her, and they have been attacked by autumn soldiers. But they were bewitched by the crown, which they find out Brialla now has. They go back to the Night Court, more sex. She learns how to make a sword, and the blacksmith actually comes back a couple of days later with the swords that Nesta sort of hammered, because it turns out that Nesta put some evil death magic into the swords. So Rhysand and Amren really don't want to tell Nesta about the magic swords she made because they don't trust her and she's evil and unstable and blah 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 blah. You know, they are Gryffindors and they don't trust the Slytherin. But then Cassian, in a brilliant move, asks her that if she had a sword, what would she name it? And she names it like Asterix or something. But that doesn't matter. Why would you ask that? And then he tells her, yeah, you made magic swords and they really didn't want to tell you. And then she's like, what the fuck? After everything I did, you guys are still against me? So Nesta is enraged and she's mad. And in her anger, she all of a sudden manages to go down the 10,000 steps. And she goes straight to Amren's house. The girls tussle and they fight. And Cassian calls Feyre. And he's like, get in there. And so Feyre busts in and is like, no, Nesta, don't do this. This isn't you. I know you, baby. But then Nesta turns around and is like, yeah, what about you? Your baby will kill you. And then she storms off. For some reason, Nesta is vilified for doing that. Why? They should have told Feyre in the first place, and Rhysand is a bitch. What? Feyre can't handle it? Please, that's not a girl. That's a woman. She saved this stupid kingdom a gazillion times. Reasons that I don't understand have been made here. Rhysand, who is such a bitch, gets so mad and he threatens to kill Nesta if she doesn't leave the city immediately for telling his wife that the baby she carries will kill her. Cassian takes her to a mountain to go camping. Therapy Mountain. And Nesta is silent, and he's a bit mean to Nesta, and Nesta is tortured all the time and feels bad and has to carry all their heavy bags. And after 3 days of not eating and feeling bad and not talking, Nesta breaks down and she cries. She confesses all her sins, and Cassian confesses all his sins, and they hug, and he rocks her in his arms. She is healed now. They go back. Nesta, Gwyn, and Amory kind of want to become something called the Valkyries, which was like an elite fighting unit that no longer exists. Nesta finds Jesus. She goes to church with Gwyn. She likes it so much that she has another vision of where the next item is, the harp. And it's underneath the evil monster prison. She and Cassian go to prison. They find the harp. She plucks a cord, which opens up a connection to Brialin. Accidentally, she also opened the cave for some evil monster called Lanthe. And Lanthe is like a death monster, but it's also made out of mist. Cassian fights the thing, tells her to run. She does. There are autumn soldiers, so she uses the harp and goes back to Cassian, who's almost dead, and then she uses her magic sword, which she now has, and she kills the evil Lanthe. Great! Cassian and her confess their love for each other, and then they make love, but this time it's soft and supple and golden. The gals have a sleepover. They make friendship bracelets and read smut together in the library. This is the show. Okay, the blood rite. A blood rite is this thing that Illyrian men have to do in order to become full warriors. Basically, you're stranded like around a mountain with no weapons and no magic, and you have to survive for 10 days on your own, and you try to kill each other, and you're also trying to get to the peak of a mountain called Ramiel. Very few people reach that top mountain, but if you just survive, you pass it and you're now a fully fledged Illyrian warrior. And of course, Cassian and Rhysand and Asriel pass the test and they all reach the top. Nesta and Cassian have a talk and Cassian is like, "You're my mate." And then Nesta is like, "No, I'm not." Then he calls her a bitch. After her fight with Cassian, she goes to Emery's house and Gwyn comes too, and the gals have a good old talk and friendship. But in the night, they get abducted by evil men and wake up in the blood rite for some reason. And this blood rite is different because there are weapons there, and they're not supposed to be weapons. Cassian finds out and he wants to go get her, but he can't because the rules are that if you take someone out of the blood rite, you and the person you took out will be killed. So instead of saving her, he has to go rescue Eris, who apparently got captured by Brialin. And he also finds out that another reason for why Rhysand wants to help Faerie not die is that him and Faerie made some stupid magic pact that if one of them dies, the other automatically dies too. That means that if Faerie dies from the baby, Rhysand will die too. Nesta wakes up in the blood rite, starts murdering people left and right. She goes to find the gals, and they decide that they really want to prove it to the sexist society. And they also want to reach the top of Ramiel. And so they make their way to it. Cassian gets captured by the evil queen and is now under her evil crown spell. On the way to the mountain, one of them gets severely injured, not Nesta. Behind them is Emery's cousin Bellius, and he wants to murder them. And so Faerie is like, "Hey girls, you go ahead and you reach the top of the mountain and I will stay here and I will defend you against Bellius." And they're like, "This is a suicide mission." But then Nesta is like, "No, girls, we can do it. We're the Valkyries. We can do anything." Now, Nesta fights Bellius. And she loses her sword, and Bellius is all like, "You can't do it." And then Nesta says, "Yes, I can, because my mate taught me well." She accepts the mating bond. She kills Bellius. But then, all of a sudden, Brialin and Cassian appear. And Brialin is like, "Give me the items from the trove. You can summon them because you're magic." And then Nesta's like, "No." And then Brialin says, "If you don't do it, Cassian will die." And then Brialin makes Cassian attack Nesta. And they fight. And Nesta is like, "You don't have to do it. You're my mate. I love you." And then when Cassian is just about to stab Nesta, he fights the crown and instead tries to sewer slide himself. But in that moment, when she sees Cassian almost die, all of a sudden her super vague death powers explode out of her and she touches Brialin and she becomes dust. Turns out her powers after all were touching people and turning them to death dust. Cool. Only the crown remains. The curse gets lifted from Cassian. They hug and kiss, and the death rite is over. But there is not peace for long, because all of a sudden more appears and says, "Guys, come with us, Faerie is giving birth." They have not found a solution to help her. The gang, which Nesta is now a part of, rushes to the house where Faerie is doing the vile act of giving birth. And when everything seems to fail and Rhysand and faerie are about to die, Nesta, an empath, realizes something might be wrong. So she uses the harp and she opens a door to the cauldron and tells it, I will give you all my magic death powers back if you save faerie. And the cauldron obliges. And Nesta and Rhysand survive. They give birth to a baby boy named Nyx. And that was Nesta's final step. She is now a Gryffindor, just like them. In the end, Nesta tells Cassian she loves him. And what Nesta essentially did, she made faerie's vagina shred-proof. And she tells Cassian that, well, she wished for that, she also made her own vagina shred-proof for the future. And then they decide to get very married. The end. Everyone is happy and okay until the next book. I'm not sure if it's been announced yet, but it's definitely coming. There was all those like backstory and hinting of like, hey Rhysand, maybe you should be High King of this country. And then Rhysand was like, no, I'm not gonna be High King. There has not been a High King in a long time. The other High Lords would never agree to it. You're such a good person. Ugh. Though Briallen is now dead, there are still 5, 6 other human queens who want revenge on them because they didn't get to become fairies, I think. And Hybern still kind of exists, and there are like other evil fairy kingdoms out there, and there still is like Lucian, and that one queen is still a bird. I assume the next one will be starring Elaine as the main character, you know? Maybe she too will be trained to join the WWE. Also, it's amazing how good of a fighter faerie became in what? The span of 4 months? That's so rare of her. And I will read that next book. And I will make a video. I will do it until the last book. The last book will then be shot in partnership with my grandchildren. The book. Okay. What did I think? What about the book? Okay. I'm here for Nesta. I'm here for the girl power. I'm here for the magic of friendship. They have friendship bracelets that light up and makes them find each other, which is so cool. I'm even here for the new smut. It goes harder. Pun intended. Pro tip. Make a drinking game out of it. Take a shot every time they use the word feasting on each other. One thing I really didn't like about the book, that I think there's just too much going on, because in essence the book is about Nesta and her mental health and how she overcomes her guilt and her PTSD and comes to her family sort of again and deals with a lot of her parental issues that were put on her. There's all this mentioning of her mother. And she also had a lot of daddy issues because she felt very left by him and the fact that he let their family slip into poverty. During editing, I realized that I forgot a huge theme in the book, which is SANR. Not only does Nesta try to heal from her own assault, but it is a huge theme around the priestesses in the library who seek refuge there because of past SA trauma. While I don't want to comment on how well the topic of healing from such trauma was executed, mainly because I read this book 9 months ago and I have no first-hand experience on the topic, I find it commendable that Sarah J Maas even made consent a topic of the book, especially since most people read the series for the smut and consent is often a problematic gray area in other smut books. That's not a bad topic, even though I kind of took away that the way to solve all these issues is to start CrossFit and get some dick. But I think it's not a bad thing to want to look into. But since it's still a fantasy book, there's this entire backstory with Briallen, and Briallen is a terrible villain. What's her deal? She's barely mentioned, and she sort of just appears in the background. To be honest, at the end, I was kind of surprised that she was still around. What is she the queen of? Because if she was a human before, but then turned into fairy, then why would her human subjects still follow her? Where do her armies come from? How did she get the crown? So I like the Nesta's arc, but the Brialin thing was just kind of like pull out of your ass. I hate magical objects. I hate chosen ones. I hate the stories where you like give up your powers for love. So what did we take away from this book? Friendship is magic. Start CrossFit against depression. Get thick. And now I will read you some scenes. Page 10. He took the invitation to survey her. Long bare legs, an elegant sweep of hips, tapered waist, too damn thin, and full, inviting breasts that were at odds with the new sharp angles of her body. He and his brothers had put a good deal of distance between the stupid youths they'd been, fucking any female who showed interest, often in the same room as each other, and the males they were now. Then there's this entire chapter about how big Cassian's dick is. I love literature. He halted, barely inside her, and studied her face. A conquering warrior god, he had called her Lady Death, and he was her sword. So, this was the video. Bye.